Hello there, and welcome to the first ever edition of Last Week or This Week on BitcoinTakeover.com or BTCTKVR.com. I am Vlad, and you can see me here. I'm at the bottom, and on top of me, you can see my video game screen. I will be playing quite some games every week while I talk about the content which I created. And this is kind of a fun concept when I think about it, as it allows me to play some games and have some fun while talking about work. I'm not sure how many people get to say this, that they have fun while talking about their work. And I still have to figure out how to use OBS and, maximize the efficiency of this space that I have. But I have posted or I have shown images of the articles that have been posted on the Bitcoin Takeover website in the last week. And you can see them at the bottom. And I also have a window which is actually dynamic, and I will be using it to open different articles on the website. And I will begin with this one about Erik Voorhees, and I have had the pleasure to interview him this week. And let me open the game so I do it both at the same time. I hope that the audio from Super Mario can also be heard and is not louder than me, and just in case I just turned up my microphone. And let's go. So I think it was on Tuesday. Yes, it was on Tuesday evening that I interviewed Erik Voorhees. It was quite a pleasure, to talk to somebody who has guided me early on when I was still getting into Bitcoin and I was still learning. He was one of the main figures that I was watching. And he was out there talking about Bitcoin, and he's a libertarian who has embraced it, not necessarily for the purpose of hodling, but because he wants to not use US dollars, and that's his purpose. That's what he's trying to do. So I disagree with a lot of what he said, especially in 2017. It doesn't mean that if I had him on my show, then I endorsed every view that he exposes or expresses. And even though he has his flaws and he supported SegWit2x and sometimes appears to be a supporter of Ethereum, he may not pass these purity tests, but we should remember that he's a libertarian, and the reason why he is here is to not use government endorsed means. So whatever helps him get away from the Fed, I suppose, is good enough for him. And I've interviewed him in the context of Shapeshift owning the KeepKey hardware wallet, as Season 8 is all about hardware wallets. And he spoke about owning and running the business of selling KeepKeys and producing them. And he also spoke about how early Bitcoiners were storing and managing their coins, which is always an interesting conversation to have, as maybe in 2011, 2012, there were not as many wallets. So your choice of securing your coins was a lot more shallow, and I suppose a lot of Bitcoiners either ran full nodes or random SPV wallets, which relied on somebody else to validate. I remember when I got interested in Bitcoin in 2016, 2017, most of the wallets were SPV, and I think it's the same situation now. I think the blockchain wallet, which is the most popular after Coinbase, which is custodial, is still relying on somebody else's node. We have come a long way nowadays, so you have no excuse at this point to not start using your full node from day one. You have so many ways to buy and run your own node with general purpose hardware. But it's still interesting, to talk to somebody who has been for such a long time involved in the space and has seen it all. And I don't know, I know people who would say that they hate Erik, but at the same time I respect him for the work that he has done, as you have people like, I don't know, nowadays we worship billionaires who buy a lot of Bitcoin, and you get Michael Saylor, who headlines the Bitcoin Magazine conference for whatever reason, even though last year he was not even around. I tend to have more respect for those who made it safe for us to get into Bitcoin. Maybe that I don't agree with everyone, but I do have some respect for them because they made this bold attempt to present Bitcoin to the world when everyone thought it was a Ponzi. And I suppose you should be listening to my conversation with Erik Voorhees, even if you don't like him. Even if you disagree with the views that he has presented since 2017, I think that he still gets a lot and he understands a lot. Oh my god, I have Bowser right here and this is just the second level. This is Super Mario 35, by the way, which is like this MOBA approach to Super Mario. So you get to... which world should I go to? Let's say 3-1. You get to compete with other players online, and if you kill an enemy, it's going to go somewhere else and attack somebody else. There are 35 players playing at the same time, competing to earn the #1 spot, to be the last survivor. In a way, it's like a last man standing competition. And even though I did not focus much on the gameplay, and I was speaking about my interview with Erik Voorhees, I think I did fine. In the context of hardware wallets, because that was kind of the whole point of interviewing Erik, he was, I guess, very honest about it. And he said that right now the KeepKey is the most affordable way to secure your coins while having the whole shapeshift experience. So if you're going to use the shapeshift exchange, the KeepKey is the most affordable device to buy and have a more secure experience. He did not claim that it's better than the Trezor. He did not claim that it's very secure for all purposes, which I appreciate. And I still believe that the KeepKey is an interesting device, and I have one around here. I have to look for it. I wish I brought it. But it's still interesting because it has been around for such a long time, and it's a clone of the Trezor from the era when there were not so many Trezor clones. And what it got right and should have been exploited more or used more widely is that large screen which displays entire addresses. So it has a very nice user experience. It's a device which looks like a small hard drive, but it's very large for a hardware wallet. You can get a lot of plausible deniability with that device. And nowadays it's like $30, even though when it first launched, I think it was like $250. It was on the premium side. It feels a lot more premium than the Trezor, I give them that, except for the metal made Trezor, but the plastic one does not feel as premium as the KeepKey. But the problem with the KeepKey is that they did not keep up with all the Trezor updates, even though Trezor is all open source and you can just copy everything like everyone else did. Coldcard has taken a lot of the Trezor code when they first launched. I think this week, which is interesting, they launched a new firmware update for the Coldcard Mark III, and it no longer uses the Trezor code. They basically created their own code base for everything, which I'm not sure if is such good news because the Trezor has been around since 2013 and has been tested by lots of security researchers, and when it had flaws, they were disclosed and fixed. So when you start a new hardware wallet and you want it to be open source, you just have to copy Trezor, I guess. That's the best way you can do it, because so many people have made it safe up to this point. And it's free open source, there's no legal or social danger in doing it because everyone has done it. And also, it's interesting during the discussion that I've had with Erik Voorhees, which is season 8, episode 3, if you're going to look for the episode on Spotify or iTunes. It's interesting that he was so much for open source software. Like, I was talking to him and I said, you know, what do you think about secure element chips on the ledger? And he expressed his views for open source software and said that everything should be as open source as possible so it can be verified by community members and scrutinized and checked to be sure that it's 100% secure. He compared the situation to Bitcoin, and at some point I told him that some of my friends would call open source software very socialist because it has no patents, it has no proprietary anything. So if there's that, some people would say, you know, it's not very competitional. If it's open source and anyone can copy it, then it's kind of socialist. But in reality, when you think about it, patents and basically using the government to prevent anyone else from working on something just because you're working on it is kind of socialist in itself, because you rely on the authority of the state. It's like saying, there's no way I can compete, there's no way I can keep my edge on the competition, so I'm going to coerce everyone else who wants to work in this field to either not work on what I'm working on or pay me royalties just because I was the first one to file a patent. You don't even have to be the first one to create something. If you're the first one to go to a government agency and file a patent, you're going to have it granted to you. And you can enforce it and you can troll people. You can do a lot of bad stuff by owning patents. And it's not always productive. Open source is revolutionary from this point of view because it allows for software and hardware to get developed outside. Oh my god, this is getting so busy right here on the screen. Outside of any constraints. And I messed up. I guess I was still in the top 6, I think. No, I was the 8. Not as great as I expected, not terrible, but I still want to win one of these. And something on which Erik is working, and you can hear about it during the interview. Okay, I was checking Twitter, sorry. I also checked the chat. There's one person watching, hi person watching. There's no activity on the chat, but I wish there was. Anyway, I'm gonna try to keep this under 1 hour so it's easy to watch during lunchtime or something. If you did not catch it live, you can still watch it at some point next week, possibly. So something else which is financed by Erik Voorhees is called the Start9 Labs. And it's an enterprise which takes advantage of all of these advancements that we have had in the full node industry, with all these boxes that are based on the Raspberry Pi that do lots of interesting computation and can become your servers essentially. And the Start9 Labs startup is actually working on providing you all in one device an interface to run Bitcoin, to run Lightning, to run Mastodon, which is an open source platform for social networks. And they also have on their roadmap to allow you to run your own node for WordPress. So this means that you can essentially store all of the content for your website on Raspberry Pi with an attached hard drive, which spells the end of relying on servers that you rent. Not that you can't do it without Start9 Labs, but it comes with such a convenient interface for individual sovereignty. So I guess you can hate Erik Voorhees if you disagree with the views he has had on Bitcoin since 2017, but there's still a lot of Bitcoin ventures in which he's an investor. So indirectly, by using the money that he has made, you know, selling Satoshi dice and selling KeepKeys and getting commissions from Shapeshift, he invests in lots of interesting Bitcoin projects. And most of them possibly serve his own purpose of trying to get away from the government as much as possible and being sovereign. But it's all open source, you can use it for whatever purpose that you want, so it's very interesting. I look forward to trying to run the Start9 Labs software on a Raspberry Pi. I can't wait to see how they add WordPress, because nowadays I think I pay for my dedicated web server, VPS, virtual personal server. I think I'm paying like $8 a month, and I get like 40 gigabytes of storage. So if I were to run my own WordPress instance and store every bit of content that I create on a server that I run myself, even if it's less reliable than something industrial, I could get one of these 1 terabyte hard drives, and I would get a lot more storage than I currently have. And I could always get one of these, what do you call them, UPS, uninterrupted power sources. I get one of those, I use it for my Lightning node, I use it for my personal website, and I can just pray that the internet never goes out, because I would lose connection and my website would become unavailable for a while. But, you know, just for the purpose of getting back to that original vision of the internet, when Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web in the early 90s, he envisioned a situation where every user would run his own... this was so stupid. So as I was saying, he envisioned a situation where every user would run his own server and self-host his content. Oh man, I was so close. I was the 7th and I was doing so well, and then I just fell. Just like that. Okay, so bottom line from this experience that I've had with Erik Voorhees, Start9 Labs is helping bring back that vision of being sovereign and running your own server while you are connected to the internet. And I think that's great. I'm pretty sure that it's not the only initiative doing this. Let me say that again. I have no idea what happened there. So I'm pretty sure that it's not the only initiative doing this, but at the same time, it's one that should be taken into consideration, and I look forward to seeing... I pressed the wrong button. I look forward to seeing what else is coming from this venture. There's a lot that they can do, and I was not even last. I mean, there were people who were a lot more terrible than me. Okay. So let's move on to the other interview that I did this week. I actually did 3 of them, but I posted only 2. The other one is coming next week. It's a surprise, but I can say that it's about the Foundation Devices Passport hardware wallet. But let's talk about Season 8, Episode 4, featuring Lawrence Nahum. Lawrence Nahum, that's his name, I mispronounced it, is the chief architect of Blockstream, and he works mostly on his own baby, which was Green Address, the mobile wallet for Android and iOS. It's one of the best mobile wallets that you can get, and it's also the one that I have been using for mobile. It's great that it has lots of power user features, and I've been a fan for a long time of everything that Lawrence has done. He's also the developer and creator of AB Core, which is an Android wallet which helps you run a full node. You can prune it, you can attach an SD card to run the whole, to store the whole blockchain and run a full node. Full archival node, I think that's the correct term for it. But it's a great addition to the portfolio of mobile wallets, and I think he has done a tremendous work. And he's also the brain behind the Jade hardware wallet, which is the device that Blockstream has launched early this year. Right now it's out of stock, you can't find it anywhere. I've actually done some voluntary work for Blockstream, translated. It was not necessarily for Blockstream, it was more like people like my mother who became interested in Bitcoin during this cycle. I don't think she bought any coins, but at the same time, I want her to have a wallet that she can understand in a language that she can read. So I have done some voluntary work for Blockstream, translating Blockstream Green, which is like the new generation or the new iteration of the Green Address wallet. And it's gonna be available with an upcoming update also in Romanian, which I think is going to help a lot of people. When I did some research to see how many mobile wallets are available in Romanian, I realized that the only popular one that's in most app stores is Coinami, which is one of the worst in terms of security. So I decided I should step in and translate one. I think I would also do it for free for Blue Wallet. But anyway, I mentioned this because I've asked Blockstream if they can reward me for the translation with one of these Jade hardware wallets, and they just plainly said that it's out of stock everywhere, so there's no way they can ship one to me. They can't find it. It's not that they don't want, it's that they don't have any units left. It's like, not only that there's a shortage for microcontrollers, I guess, for electronics these days, or there's some issue with shipping, but also the number of orders has exceeded the expectations. So I suppose they did not expect so many Jades to get ordered through the Blockstream shop. But it's interesting that the Jade costs about $40 and has lots of interesting features. Like, it has a very powerful microcontroller processor. It's 100% open source. It uses Bluetooth to connect to your iOS phone. And this is very important because Apple does not allow most devices to connect. If you want to make your third-party device compatible with iPhones and iPads, you have to go through a very long and costly review process. So what companies like Ledger and Blockstream have done is to create devices that connect with a Bluetooth connection, because your iPhone is going to have a Bluetooth connection. So they can get away this selection process that Apple imposes by running this extra step involving Bluetooth. On Android it's a lot more simple because you can authorize the device manually. It's not as secure, so part of the reason why Apple is using this walled garden approach is because they want your device to be harder to hack, which I suppose is a legit concern. But at the same time, there are cases when you want to do something objectively great with your device and you cannot. So it's nice that the Jade, just like the Ledger Nano X, has a Bluetooth connection. It also has a camera that you can use to scan QR codes, and that can be a very good use case for cold storage and not ever connecting your wallet via USB, but I guess you will connect it for more updates or other purposes. I'm getting my ass kicked right now. I'll try to focus. I beat Bowser on the first castle. I think that was a castle from World 1-4. Whoa, look at these turtles. What do you call them? Koopas? This is insane. Look at all this action. I need one more coin to be able to get one of these question marks, actually. I need a mushroom. Oh, I got the flower, which is perfect. It's getting very intense. I suppose I'm among the last two, so there is a chance that I can win this. I'm sorry I can't really talk about the stuff that I published on Bitcoin Takeover right now, because I'm getting my ass kicked. And it's never nice to get your ass kicked. But I got a mushroom and this is a good start. But my time is running out. Oh man, how am I gonna get there? Time is running out. 9, 8, 7, 6. I lost. It was like the worst level where I could get, because there's no way without a flower to kill enemies. I ranked second. Which isn't that bad, but you know you could win, so you're going to have some regrets about it. Let me see if there's anyone watching right now. There is nobody watching. I'm pretty disappointed. I hope that this is going to turn into a bigger success as I go. If I do it every week and it becomes a habit, I hope that this can actually become a success. Anyway, let me check Twitter to see what's going on. I did not get many reactions, so I hope you appreciate the honesty if you're watching this. So, hi one person watching, if you're watching this, please leave a comment and please subscribe to the channel. Encourage me to create more content. And now let's play another game and talk about what else I have done on the Bitcoin Takeover website. Let me scroll a bit. These are pictures of the Jade that you can see on the bottom right screen. And the Jade is a very nice device for what it costs. For $40, there's a lot to it. I'm actually interested to see what else they can do with it, because for now it's designed specifically to work with your Blockstream Green mobile wallet, which is very nice. It makes the device a lot more secure, and for $40, I mean, that's almost half the price of a Trezor or a Ledger. So they are hitting hard when it comes to trying to bring it on the market and become popular and show to the competition that they can actually build. I don't know if they're making a profit on selling devices, but you know, they're breaking the business model that other companies have been using. Right now I think you pay like $70 for a Trezor 1 and like $80 for Ledger Nano S, about $100 for a Bitbox 02, which is more advanced and competes with devices like the Trezor Model T, which was about $170 if I'm not mistaken. And to have a new player which comes in and says, you know, this is going to cost $40. That's a major step in this market, and it can be a disruptive move. It's very hard for me sometimes to focus on the game and talk at the same time and make sense. So sorry if I have these pauses. Anyway, I think the Jade is interesting and I look forward to trying it. It was the first time when I did an interview about a hardware wallet that's launched and I don't have the device. So there is that. I get to be sad about it, I guess. So I almost beat the level. I look forward to trying the Jade. I want to see how it performs in situations like multi-sig. I want to see how well it integrates with third-party wallets as soon as there's support for HWI, which is a standard for integrating hardware wallets. And also about the Jade, something that I was about to say is that Lawrence Nahum has mentioned an interesting use case where you get to automate some actions on the Jade. So for example, it can authorize transactions automatically if your balance is going to get increased. Like for example, you use the Jade on Join Market or on exchanges where you have like oracles. And you can do trading or you can do coordination of coin joins with the Jade just by having the proper code running in the background, and it's going to authorize any I messed up here. It's going to authorize any transaction which increases the amount of coins that you own, which I think is huge. Unless there's going to be some sort of dust attack on your hardware wallet and it's going to get enabled automatically by the interface. So I suppose you can also I died. Let me take a just a minute break. I need to get something to drink and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, sorry. My throat was sore and I needed to get a drink of water. Okay, so let's get back to this. I was about to mention that the Jade is interesting, I look forward to getting it, and you should listen to this interview with Lawrence Nahum because you might be familiar with his work from, what's the name of his podcast with Udi? Reckless Review. So you might know him from the Reckless Review, which is quite a funny podcast, and he does a lot of interesting work. Like, I suppose he doesn't get more recognition because he's not very active on Twitter, but he should be getting a lot of recognition because he coordinates a lot of developers at Blockstream and does a lot of work in the background, lots of useful Bitcoin development. And as I say during the podcast, I'm kind of a fan of his work. I might be biased there, but he has done a lot of useful work for Bitcoin in terms of developing wallets, and possibly a lot more that I'm not even aware of. I mean, he's been around for like 8-9 years or something. So I suppose his heart is in the right place. And the episode is available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. You can also find it in my free RSS feed, which I recommend that you use because it's a lot more private. You can open it with the Tor browser, so not even my hosting provider is going to know your IP address. Let me get out of this situation here, as I wasted a lot of time and I need to make it back. I'm back to 75 seconds. So this is a race in which you have to get enough time by killing enemies, and also kill enough enemies to play tricks on your fellow players who are across the screen. You can see them all around. And I just messed up. This was one of my worst games. I almost beat the game. I almost finished first a couple of runs ago, and right now I'm so terrible. I should focus more. Anyway, this is a great opportunity to move to the last article that I'm going to mention, which got released on the Bitcoin Takeover website. It's called How to Make Bitcoin Transactions Environmentally Friendly. And this is my attempt to cover everything that I know about mining and why it's important and why it will not go away. That's something that we have to get used to, that mining will not go away. But at the same time, there are so many misconceptions about what mining is and how it works. There are people who think that as the price increases, there's going to be more mining because it's more profitable. And that's not true, because the miners compete for the exact same reward. So, for example, in gold mining, you have the miners who go into a gold mine and they're not aware of the amount of gold that they can find there. They can get a lot of gold and everyone gets rich, or they can only discover that the supply is limited, but at the same time you don't know the total supply of gold, and there's no way to audit it. There's no way to uncover all of the resources that we have beneath the earth and in mines and in mountains and lots of places where we find gold. So besides the fact that we don't know the supply, if you invest more resources into gold mining, you're going to find more gold because there's going to be more research in it. So naturally the price is going to go down if there's too much activity. But in the case of Bitcoin, you know exactly how many coins exist, and there's a difficulty adjustment which happens every 2 weeks. So if more miners join, it's going to become more difficult to discover blocks. And if it's more difficult to discover blocks, then the rewards are going to diminish, and you're going to require more hashing power to be able to find blocks, which means that some miners are going to drop off and stop mining, while others are joining, and it's very dynamic. If the security diminishes because there's less hash power, which is part of the FUD which appears every bear market, and they call it the miner's death spiral, the difficulty readjusts, and there's going to be some lower difficulty which incentivizes more miners, more small people who operate rigs to join in, while maybe that industrial scale miners are not going to make the same profits and they're going to stay away. And basically the system encourages anyone to join in and take the reward. It's very agnostic from this point of view. It doesn't matter if it's a pool, it doesn't matter if the coins come from a rich part or someone who is mining from their own bedroom. As long as you solve that problem and you respect consensus rules, you have a chance to find a block and get the reward. Oh, I should get this one up. So if more people invest in mining operations and start mining, it's not like they're going to get more rewards. They possibly increase their own chances, but that means it's kind of a zero-sum game where they compete for the same bitcoins. So if one pool or one party decides to buy more mining operations, more hardware to continue mining, it might diminish the chances of others, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they will get more rewards all the time. The competition might step in and make their operations less profitable. It's a very sophisticated game theory situation where it doesn't mean that the operations will increase all the time or there's going to be a lot more energy which gets consumed, which is actually the topic of the article if you look at it. And I've also tried to explain parts about how Bitcoin mining is tied to transactions, as we need to mine blocks for transactions to get validated. And I've also used arguments from an advocate of Ethereum, whose name is Donald McIntyre. He has been involved in Ethereum since it launched and used to be very enthusiastic about it, but now he is more of a Bitcoiner, and in terms of Ethereum he supports the classic side, ETC. And he has made some very nice comparisons between proof of work and proof of stake, which I found very valuable. You don't have to agree with his views, but you can't argue that his work in terms of defining what proof of work is and how it compares to proof of stake is not valuable in explaining, as I've even heard that there are government advisors who tell politicians to over-regulate Bitcoin mining and support proof of stake situations and systems because they're friendlier to the environment, but comparatively they're not as safe. We don't have enough evidence, and from a game theory point of view, it's not as sustainable to go proof of stake, as you're going to create some sort of oligarchy. Proof of stake, if you're not aware, means that the more coins you currently own and you stake, the more rewards you're going to get. So if you're a whale and you own lots of coins and you want to get richer, you're going to get richer. Unless, of course, you have plans to spend those coins at some point in the future. But if you have too many, you're going to be able to do it. And right now, I suppose the biggest proof of stake experiment that's being worked on is Ethereum 2.0. And if you look at the parties that are going to be the biggest stakers in Ethereum, they are mining pools. They are exchanges. So exchanges which already hold a lot of bitcoins are going to stake the bitcoins of... Not Bitcoin, sorry. This is what happens when I play a video game at the same time. Maybe I should take it slower. But I was presenting the case against proof of stake, and I was explaining that in the case of Ethereum 2.0, which is the biggest experiment for proof of stake, the exchanges are going to be the biggest parties involved. They are the biggest stakers, they have lots of coins that they hold already in cold storage, and they're going to put them to use in staking operations, which is the equivalent of mining, but basically you're going to have exchanges becoming like the overlords of the system. And it's very hard to overthrow them, that's the problem. In proof of stake, you have elites that get established and it's hard to remove them from power afterwards. In proof of work, that's not a problem. We have seen the situation in Bitcoin mining where at some point in 2017 there was Bitmain that got so big that people were worried that it can double spend transactions and launch 51% attacks on the network. And there were also concerns about Bitmain spamming the Bitcoin blockchain, and Bitmain was kind of the reason why they rushed when they launched it. They launched SegWit in the summer of 2017. It was supposed to be as slow and deliberative as Taproot is nowadays with Schnorr signatures. If you follow the debates for Schnorr, you're going to see that people are being very careful and cautious about making any changes in Bitcoin. But they were not like this in 2017 with SegWit, specifically because they feared the power and influence of Bitmain and that they could do something malevolent to the chain. So it was regarded more of an emergency, specifically because they had one party which was so powerful that they could double spend transactions, they could spam the blockchain, they could do a lot of bad stuff. But given the bad decisions that they have made, they are no longer as powerful as they used to be. And they are usually pointed as some of the bad actors in the space. So a company that used to be a giant in mining is no longer a giant in mining, specifically because they have made bad business decisions. At the time, Bitmain started supporting Bitcoin Cash, and it turned out that it was a terrible decision, as they were owning or they probably still own about 1 million BCH, and they sold part of their BTC for their own agenda, thinking that BCH is going to get bigger just because they keep on buying more and people followed their example. But nobody bought into their Ponzi. If there's so much control over a network, it will most likely not succeed. And it's mostly just a scam for small users who buy into marketing. As you can see nowadays, with companies getting into Bitcoin, they have this fundamental analysis which explains to them why Bitcoin is valuable, and they understand that this asset relies on a very decentralized network. And this is invaluable to them because they understand that there is no single party that can censor transactions or compromise ownership of coins, which is very important to respect the ownership, the private property. In the case of Ethereum, we have seen so many cases where decisions are made recklessly on the spot by people who get on a conference call and they decide that it's a good idea to do something, so they proceed and they convince the rest of the community that they should do it, and it's usually deployed in a record time. Like in a few weeks they are expected to upgrade and the rest of the network has to follow the example, or else they're going to fall behind. So that's not really decentralization. In the case of Bitcoin, with all the debates and all the situations that we have where everyone is skeptical, nobody trusts the developers 100% with their decisions, and we verify everything for weeks and months in a row, and we don't even agree on the situation or the way to which we make an upgrade, that's real decentralization. And it's enabled by the security of the network and the game theory that's involved. I believe that if Bitcoin was proof of stake, it would not be as decentralized. And we have to face this reality where maybe that we don't like all of the carbon footprint, we don't like the electricity consumption, but at the same time we need to have, for billions of people, a currency that's not owned by any government, not controlled by any government, and empowers any individual on the planet to own money, to cross borders with money without having it confiscated, to be able to become truly sovereign from oppressive regimes and governments. This is, to human rights, invaluable, and we need to have it if we care about human rights. If we just want this fiat system to succeed, then we can jump on the Visa bandwagon and agree that they are the pinnacle of financial innovation. We can get on the fintech bandwagon, which only cares about improving some sort of transaction types. Like, I can think of Ripple, which in itself can be interesting, but it's highly centralized and it serves a very specific purpose for financial institutions that are already established. It's useful to banks, it's useful to MoneyGram, which is a wiring service, and they don't even need the XRP token. That's only created so the Ripple company has more money to use. But it's not disruptive in any sense. Like, people speculate on it, they invest, they buy the token, they make money sometimes, they lose money most of the times. But you have to think about what Bitcoin accomplishes and how inconvenient it is. And we have reached the point where the FUD skyrockets. I got a question in the chat which is endearing and I'm happy. So Bubolino wants to know what I think about a monthly investment for 3 to 5 years in Bitcoin, and if it's held in cold storage. So I'm not really here to give financial advice, but it depends on how you do it. For example, I think it's a bad idea to put all of your money right now and buy some Bitcoin at this price, or at any price for that matter, and just wait on it. You may succeed. So historically, if you look at the data, every 4 years you're going to most likely double your money in fiat. But at the same time, you should not look at these patterns as something that you can take for granted. And usually you should only spend your disposable income. So if you're making some money and you want to invest, like, I have no idea which amount I should recommend, but for the sake of making it realistic for the entire world, and I suppose there are people in the world living on less than $1 a day, let's say that you invest $5 every month, which if you make $1 every day, that's 1/6, so it's 16% of your income that gets invested. That's not unrealistic. So if you are able to save that and you can invest it in buying some bits, you can do that, and if you hold it in cold storage, that's a very good approach. I know somebody and we're kind of friends and we talk on Telegram sometimes. He told me that he keeps his coins on Kraken just because they are insured. And he's aware of the risk and he's aware that he can lose it all, but his consolation is that he can just get some fiat money if the exchange loses his funds. But it's a very delicate situation and you can listen about it. You can hear more about it during my interview with Erik Voorhees, where we actually discussed this situation about insurance. Like, insurance companies are motivated to not give you any money. Ever. They're going to hang on to every excuse to not give you any money. And if they have to give you any money, they might take the situation to court. They can use their lawyers, they can claim it's your fault or it's somebody else's fault and it's not covered by their clauses. And you're going to sue them, you're going to talk to them for a number of years and see them in court. And then you're going to win, you're going to get some fiat according to the arrangement that you're having. But by the time you get your fiat, it's likely that the price of BTC is going to be higher. So if you held Bitcoins on an exchange like Coinbase or Kraken, and they lost it because they got hacked, and you're going to get fiat, you're going to get the same amount of fiat many years from now, because, you know, insurance companies never make it easy. And by the time you do that, you're going to buy a small amount of Bitcoin. So maybe that you get the same amount of fiat, which can have infinite inflation and is going to only lose value across time, but you're not going to get the same amount of Bitcoins that you own. And I can also argue that exchanges tend to be honeypots. So lots of hackers, when they look at exchanges, they see them as places that they can potentially hack and extort or get lots of coins out of them if they're successful. So I imagine that there are lots of attempts every day to hack exchanges. It's getting very difficult, so I had to stop talking. And my argument right now goes towards cold storage and self-custody. Some people will say that it's hard and it's not very secure to store your own coins. Well, if you know what you're doing and you keep small amounts in UTXOs, and UTXOs are like pockets for your coins. So you send like 0.001 BTC to every UTXO or every pocket. It's going to fly under the radar. Nobody's going to look at the blockchain and see that address and say, you know, this holds a lot of Bitcoin and I want to hack it. It's very unlikely for that to happen. So if you keep, for example, 1 Bitcoin, which is a lot of money today, I think I would have to work like 5 years and not spend on anything else but Bitcoin to be able to buy one. So if you have 1 Bitcoin today, and you're going to spread it across smaller UTXOs, you can spread it in like 100 different addresses, and that's going to be 100 addresses of 0.1 BTC each. And very few people are going to look at it and say, yeah, I want to hack this, because the risk of getting caught and doing something wrong is greater than the reward. So if you make it so that you don't incentivize hackers to get to you, you're less likely to get hackers. That's actually one of the best security advice that I got from people like Peter Todd. You need to obscure a little bit and not make it attractive to hackers. It's the same as going outside with a lot of money and letting people know that you own a lot of money. This was a hard game. You don't really want to expose to people how much money you own. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or it's any other form of money. It's just a terrible idea. Don't do it. Don't tell anyone how much money you own, because you turn yourself into a target. There are people who do live videos on Instagram and Facebook, and they show off what they have in their homes, and then they go on vacation or something, and people who know where they live, they break into their houses, they steal all the fancy stuff that they own, they steal jewelry, they steal possibly spare money or savings, they steal televisions, electronics, everything that can be of value. It's a terrible advice, and if you think that you're keeping something in a safe that's hard to crack so they can break into your house, well, I got some news for you. They can take that safe with them and steal it. So if you have a lot of money, or even if you don't have a lot of money, it's a good idea to practice financial privacy with great responsibility. So getting back to the question that I got, it's a good idea to keep it in cold storage, and I think I've explained to you why, and I've also explained to you how. You should not, if you have 1 Bitcoin, you should not keep it in a 1 Bitcoin address, as that's going to be like a top 10%, I guess. And there's going to be an incentive for a hacker to try to break that address. But if you keep your coins in small amounts, and I think there are lots of whales who do that on purpose so that nobody knows how many coins they own, I think you're pretty safe. It's the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you adapt it to Bitcoin, it's don't put all of your Bitcoins in one UTXO. And if you don't know what an UTXO is, you can look it into the Bitcoin wiki. And also, it stands for unspent transaction output. So the Bitcoin network keeps into account how many Bitcoins have not been spent in each account. And that's how you know how many you own. It uses kind of a reverse language in its design. It says, this user has not spent 0.125 Bitcoin, which means that you actually own 0.25 Bitcoin, or I don't remember which amount I said. It's just an example. This is fun. I'm gonna look at the chat to see if I have any more questions, but until I get a break to also look at the chat, which should be now, click. Okay, so I don't have any more questions on the chat, so let me talk about how to make Bitcoin transactions more friendly with the environment, which is the article which I published, and you can find that in the description below. If you want to read it, or you can listen to me talk about it, I don't care really. As long as I spread the knowledge, that's all that matters. So, essentially, a good way to reduce the amount of electricity that we use with Bitcoin would be to onboard more people on side chains, which use federated servers or merged mining, which are a lot less power hungry, or to get on the Lightning Network, which essentially requires only 2 transactions, one to get in and one to get out. So you do 1 transaction, you get on the Lightning Network, and you can do as many transactions as you want. You can send, you can receive. There is still some limit according to how big your channels are. But at the same time, it's very environmentally friendly because you validate everything on your client, and with the rest of the network you have verification processes going between nodes, but the nodes are mostly Raspberry Pis. Unlike the ASICs that are mining coins, you have an entire network that can run on Raspberry Pis, and I did the math in the article. A Raspberry Pi costs like $8 a year to run. It costs less than recharging your phone, I think. If you recharge your iPhone every day, I think you're draining a lot more energy than the average Raspberry Pi, which runs at its average capacity, which is very impressive. I lost again. It used to be a lot more environmentally friendly with earlier models of the Raspberry Pi. You still have the Raspberry Pi Zero, which consumes very little electricity. I think it's like a light bulb or something. It takes even less. But with the Raspberry Pi 4 you get a very good average of lower energy consumption and decent power. You can run lots of interesting applications. You can run a Bitcoin and Lightning node at the same time on it and have a good performance that's reliable for the rest of the network. It's really impressive what you can do with these small, very low power devices. So that's a good way to onboard people who care and are very much concerned with lowering their carbon footprint. I have friends who are concerned about traveling with airplanes or taking car rides, and they calculate how much they are damaging the environment with carbon footprint, and they're trying to lower it every year. I suppose they've done the best job during the pandemic when everyone stayed at home. Okay, I took a break from talking just to focus on the game. But yeah, for those people we need to present to them the Lightning Network and explain the advantages and how it does not rely on the main blockchain for every transaction, which means that the energy consumption is going to be much lower. It's lower than Visa, I can give you that. And the fact that you can be sovereign, that's invaluable. There are so many people nowadays who just say, you know, we should stop Bitcoin mining because it's so wasteful and it doesn't provide anything of value outside of financial speculation between libertarians. And that's not true. You have to understand that this is a non-governmental currency. Something that cannot be censored, cannot be stopped. And it can be a big enemy of authoritarian governments around the world. But at the same time, when the democracies that we used to appreciate and esteem for their respect for human rights turn out to be some of the biggest oppressors of human rights, and they do it in the name of public health or saving the environment, it makes you wonder who the good guys are anymore. It depends on what you care about, but they're going to express opinions that are not very much compatible with the Western way of thinking and all of this civilization that we have built since Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States and the principles of the French Revolution. Like, those were big moments in the history of defining what an individual is. And it seems like we are living times when they don't care as much about individuals, and they don't want us to think as individuals anymore. They want to think of the world as a global village, and they want us to act globally, even though the situations tend to be very different. There is no more room for individuals in this equation, so it's kind of saddening, but at the same time we need to present Bitcoin for what it is, for a currency that is useful for the rest of the world that has no access to financial services. And sometimes even the developed world has no access to financial services, as we have seen in 2018, 2019, when cancel culture was at its peak and there were so many people who are no longer allowed to be on PayPal, to be on Patreon, to monetize their own content. And you can agree that these are private entities that provide private services and can deny your access to finance. But at the same time, there are very few alternatives, and you can even have the banks shutting down their accounts to say that they don't want to be associated. And in this situation, in the current financial landscape, there is very little that you can do without a bank account. I remember when I was a student in Sweden, I was on exchange in 2013. I had the money in cash to pay my rent, but nobody wanted to take it. I went to their offices, I tried to explain to them, I withdrew this cash from an ATM and I received my scholarship in my bank account, and I don't have an online account to send the money to your account. And they were like, yeah, but we're not allowed to handle cash. You're supposed to send it to our account, and I had no way to send it. So I went to Western Union and I wanted to send the money to the bank account of the housing agency that was providing my small studio in which I was living. And at Western Union they asked me for a passport. And I was like, I'm a citizen of the European Union. I don't need to have a passport. I can travel with only my ID card. I don't have a passport. And their policy demanded for a passport, so I could not pay my rent just because I did not have access to the proper banking services. So I went to a Swedish bank and I tried to open an account, and they did not allow me because I was not staying for long enough and I was not working because I was a student, So I had no guarantee for them that I could pay the fees because I had no income. So it was very inconvenient. So the workaround that I found at the time, even though I could use Bitcoin or something, and I guess I would have been a genius if I used Bitcoin in 2013. The workaround was to ask a classmate from France to pay for me. And that's what I did. I gave them the cash and I was next to them. I gave them all the information to make the payment. They had their passport, but there's this double standard in the European Union. You can be a citizen of the European Union from the Schengen area or one from outside, and as a Romanian you're from the outside, so there's extra background check each time you do something. When you cross a border or when you try to make a payment, they are extra suspicious because you're not part of their circle of trust. So it was kind of terrible, and this is one of the use cases of Bitcoin, and more specifically I suppose this is a big use case for the Lightning Network. This is the kind of payment that you can make peer-to-peer to another node instantly, with minimal fees, with great privacy. But at the same time I see that privacy is also becoming an issue, and you had the president, I think that's his position, at the International Settlements Bank, who was speaking against privacy and explaining why they're trying to track every transaction to prevent bad people from using bank accounts or something. I can go to the same store today for 10 years and talk to the same clerk behind the counter and buy the same item, and they cannot know my name or where I'm from or my bank account number or from which bank I have an account because I pay in cash. So does that make me a criminal if I go to a place and never mention my name and pay in cash and I don't commit any crime ever? It's kind of crazy. And most of these innovations that we see in the space, especially some of this DeFi that we see, which is very trendy nowadays, and I'm not saying that it's not interesting or that it's not useful for some use cases, even though we can argue about NFTs until tomorrow and I can say why they're a bad idea. So their problem is that they are very surveilled. They happen on open blockchains which have very poor privacy. So it's very Orwellian, the amount of data which gets collected from these transactions, and the fact that you have, for example, Ethereum people who have .eth domains that they're running, and all of their transactions are on a public ledger, and they admit that they have made the transactions. And they make it a norm so that everybody else who uses the system is going to also identify themselves. That's very terrible for privacy in general. And I don't think the future of money should be like this, where you have to identify every transaction. I can understand why banks do it, but if we are trying to build something better, which suits billions of people who are unbanked, we should also consider why they need privacy, because the fact that they are not banked and they don't benefit from banking services is also due to some sort of oppressive regime. So giving them privacy is only natural and makes a lot of sense. But I haven't seen many discussions about privacy during this bull cycle, which is kind of depressing when you think about it. And you even see people like Michael Saylor, who are very much against. Somebody messaged me on Twitter to ask about getting laser eyes. I'm gonna do that later. So I suppose we should talk more about privacy in the future and think of systems that grant more privacy to the users, because that's needed in situations where your government is not very friendly. And I think even with Bitcoin we are still in a honeymoon phase, where maybe that they're not trying to break into your computer or make you report everything that you do, and they're not restricting mining and running your own node, but at the same time they just might, and they have showed that they have the disposition and the ideological drive to break into anything. If they were able to restrict your freedom of movement, and they could impose a new norm to wear a mask everywhere, even outside, where it's hard to prove that the virus spreads directly, especially if you do the so-called social distance. So if you stand at like 6 feet or 2 meters behind somebody, I don't think you can spread any virus as easily. But they have developed like a new normal in like a year, and probably by this point they have also figured out that they can make up anything with the right kind of story and make us change the way that we conduct transactions, the way that we interact with each other, the way that we look at something as intimate as dating. I recall government agencies having dating advice for some of the most private situations that you can think of. I don't think it's much different from the situation described in George Orwell's 1984. It's just that they're not as physically oppressive, so they're not going to get into your house and arrest you for doing something that was caught on camera. Or I don't think yet. Maybe that they do it in China. I don't think they do it in my country, and you can still appeal the decision to some legal institutions that exist for the purpose of defending your rights. So you might win in a court of human rights if you are part of the West, but at the same time it's terrible. The fact that you have to get to that length. It's part of the reason why I support privacy projects in Bitcoin. And I like the fact that one of the sponsors of Season 8 is Samurai Wallet. I'm sorry, I said Samurai, but I was supposed to say Wasabi. They're going to kill me. Goodbye sponsorship. No, it's Wasabi Wallet, which is one of the nicest desktop wallets ever. They compete with Samurai Wallet. And personally, I'm not a fan of Samurai, even though I endorse privacy. The default setting for Samurai is an SPV wallet, which takes your XPubs, so all of your public keys are going to get registered by them. And they're going to see all of your transactions. And they are going to know when you generate a new address from your public key. So basically they can surveil all of the users who don't run the so-called dojo, and the dojo is the full node for your Samurai wallet. So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a bigger fan of Wasabi wallet, which is a lot more ethical in regards to its conduct and allows you to connect your own node, so you don't have to download some software that they branded and created for their own product. You join with your full node that you run by yourself and use the preferred kind of hardware for it. It's getting very hard, so that's why I'm taking pauses in my speech. Also, Wasabi is trying to optimize the way that they conduct coin joins. Today it's kind of expensive. It used to not be so expensive, so when Bitcoin was like $6,000, it was $600 to do a coin join, which I think is decent. But now when Bitcoin is like 60,000, it costs like $6,000 to do a coin join. So it's very expensive and more than most people can afford. I don't think I can do coin joins anymore. I don't own enough Bitcoin, but they're going to fix that in a future update with the so-called Wasabi 2.0 that's coming. And also, the other sponsor that I have for the podcast is Voltoro, which is a business that I like because they deal with honest money. That's the idiom that I like to use when I describe them. They are an exchange for gold, and they let you buy gold with bitcoins and also sell gold for bitcoins. Basically, they are firm believers in honest money, and they let you do this transaction, which is not very friendly with the fiat standard. It's very old school, but at the same time new and innovative because it integrates Bitcoin. And Joshua is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in this space. I'm not sure if he spends much time on Twitter, so you don't get to interact him much on social media, but if you get to talk to him ever, and I wish you would get to talk to Joshua Scigala, that's his name. So Joshua Scigala, Scigala or Scigala, that's how you pronounce it. He's one of the nicest people around. He has been in Bitcoin since like 2010 and has been an advocate for it. He has started Voltoro in 2015, I think. And very nice guy. I can't praise him enough. I'm very proud that he accepted to sponsor my work. I'm very honored, to be honest. And you can find him if you look for my interview with him from season... which one was it? I think it was from season 6 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I think it was episode 10, if I'm not mistaken. So season 6, episode 10. I have a link in the article that I wrote about him. And that goes back to 2011 when Bitcoin cost like, I think it was $10, and people were making fun of him on YouTube for the fact that he bought Bitcoin at $10 and the price went down. Which is very funny now to watch and see how some of the arguments that they were presenting are very similar to the ones that you read from people who don't like Bitcoin today. So in a way this reassures you that the situation has always been like this. Maybe it was even worse back in the day. And you're considered to be a lot crazier if you bought BTC in any way. And we are kind of spoiled nowadays because we have so many ways to buy, so many alternatives, so many great wallets to use, so many ways to run a full node. It's like you don't even have an excuse as soon as you start learning about what Bitcoin is and how it works, you're going to have to run a node. And I can mention some arguments in favor of running a node right now if you want to listen and you're willing to stick around. Or maybe I can save it for a future episode when I actually write an article about it, but maybe I can spoil it a bit. And I'm gonna write an article for next week maybe, and also talk about it. So the idea behind it is that your full node is your access to personal sovereignty in relation to the Bitcoin network. When you follow this motto, this catchphrase of don't trust, verify, you have to also run your own node. You don't have to trust somebody else with the data that concerns your transactions and your public addresses and your private keys. For example, if I download the Blockstream mobile wallet on my phone, I'm going to use their backend and their own nodes. I don't think that they let you connect to a random node on the network. I'm pretty sure that you connect to their own, and you get that wallet for free, but I suppose that they also use your transaction data for some purpose. So that's something that should be avoided, and you should be as autonomous and as sovereign as possible. And not only that, you get privacy for your own transactions with your node, but you also... I had to do that. So what did I say? Not only that you get privacy for your own transactions, but you also get self-validation. So the transactions that you do yourself are going to get validated by your own node, and they're going to get broadcast across the network by your own node. When you receive a transaction, it's going to get verified by your own node, which is very important, because there can be situations where you can trick users with fake bitcoins, and that has happened in the past. When terrible wallets display a balance of bitcoins that does not exist, if you verify and you validate every transaction that you receive by yourself, it means that you don't trust anybody else with it. And I think I've read a very good comparison from Charlie Lee, whom you can also listen to in season 7 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, who said that running a node is like wearing your own watch. When you're not wearing your own watch, you have to ask other people what time it is. And sometimes you can assume that they are well-meaning and they're going to tell you what time it is, but there can be situations where they trick you or they are not very precise. And when you decide to what's the term for it? To set your own watch, to set the time for it, you can use any time zone that you prefer and any reference so that it helps you. When you ask somebody else about what time it is, they're going to tell you the time according to their own settings. On the Bitcoin network, everyone is on the same time. I suppose most nodes sync to the latest situation on the blockchain. But it's still useful to self-validate and be sure that at all time you're not relying on any trusted third party. This is why Bitcoin was invented in the first place. Not to replicate the trust involved in banking services and systems, but to enable self-verification. I think even Satoshi, in a post on Bitcoin Talk, which was the forum that was very active and popular back in the day, has mentioned that people who rely on third parties to verify their transactions are kind of second-class citizens of the network. Unless you do self-verification, you're not a first-class citizen. So if you want to be a first-class citizen, just run a node. There are so many useful software applications and dashboards that you can download for a device as basic as an inexpensive Raspberry Pi. For example, the one that I recommend usually is Raspi Blitz, an implementation for the Raspberry Pi. That's very simple to install and runs on your Raspberry Pi, obviously. And it has a nice dashboard. I think by default it also requires a touchscreen to operate, so in a sense it makes you buy a touchscreen for the Raspberry Pi, but on the other hand you're not going to require a keyboard and a mouse, and you can do everything on the screen of your device. And that's kind of empowering sometimes. I don't want to die, I don't want to die. I want to carry on. This is madness happening on screen right now. I mean, the last 4 players in the game. And I need to get more coins to get power-ups. Anyway, Raspy Blitz, you can find it. I think it's on the Fulmo website, but if you look up Raspy Blitz, RASPIBLITZ, on any search engine like Google or DuckDuckGo, you're going to find a GitHub which displays a tutorial so that you can run your own. And if you don't want to run your own and you want to buy a device, I think in Europe it's sold by Fulmo, and in the United States it's sold by, I think it's called Lightning in a Box. So let me check. I have a browser window here. It's lightninginabox.com. By the way, they're not sponsoring any of this, but I wouldn't mind if they sent a donation of sorts. And the other one is fulmo.com. Lightning in a Box takes some time to load, but Fulmo, they have the Raspy Blitz with everything included for 349 euro. That's kind of a lot of money, but you can build your own for half the price. And this one has the nice metal case. The basic one without the metal case is 289 euro, 269 euro if you just get the basic heatsink. And you can also buy the case separately at some point in the future. And let's see this one. So you can get it with a pre-synced blockchain, but I recommend that you don't do that and you sync it yourself with your own connection, so you don't have to trust Fulmo that they're going to be honest about it. And yeah, for extra RAM you're going to pay like, is it 20 euro? 30 euro extra. So it's 300 if you want 4 gigabytes, which is very recommended for a Raspberry Pi. So you get 4 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. You pay like, is it 70? So for, yeah, 70 extra euro for the 8 gigabyte version, and you get an SD card of 32 gigabytes, a 1 terabyte SSD, a Raspberry Pi with heatsink case, an SSD case, a power supply, the LCD touchscreen that you can see here, 1 meter Ethernet cable, and the interface looks kind of basic, but at the same time it's easy to operate with your finger on the touchscreen. And what I like about this and why I recommend it is that it uses the join market. So if you want to do coin joins, it does it on the most decentralized service there is, the join market. And it has all of these useful applications. It runs on Tor by default, so it grants you privacy for your Lightning node, for your channels, for everything else. Nobody transacting with you is going to know your IP address, which is important because they're not going to know where you're from and who your internet service provider is. And I think it's a very nice experience. So if you're going to buy one, you can pay 369. Lightning in a Box doesn't seem to work. Maybe I should report to them. Oh, it's lightninginabox.co, not .com. But this is the store that you can find in the United States. And you can get the Raspberry Blitz 8GB for $379.99 plus shipping. I don't really recommend Umbrel, so that's very popular nowadays, but it's not open source, so it's a lot harder to verify that the code is honest. It's more inexpensive as far as I can see than the Raspberry Blitz. Actually, it's kind of the same price, but if you can get the Raspberry Blitz, get the Raspberry Blitz. It's open source, it's been tested for over 2 years. It may not be, you know, cool as Umbrel is right now, but when you look for a node, you want more security. At the same time, you can build your own for half the price, and I was about to show you the tutorial. I've also posted it in several places on the Bitcoin Takeover website, but they have this section, Raspberry Blitz. There's a link somewhere here which helps you build your own. It's possibly on the home website. Yeah, GitHub right here. So it's shop.fullmo.org. You scroll down and you go to GitHub Raspberry Blitz. You click on this and you're going to go to their GitHub. You scroll down and you have a full tutorial which explains all the features that you have, all the hardware that you require, and it says that the whole package to buy it costs around $250. I think you can get it for less if you don't buy a Samsung or, I don't know, some fancy SSD, even though it's better to be safe. You can get the minimal package for $180, as I said. And it explains to you how you can assemble it, how you can flash the ROM on an SD card, how you install it. It's all very educational. I should put it probably in the description below, just in case you want to try this yourselves. If you want to run your own node, but at the same time, you can also do it from command line and run Bitcoin Core, install it. And after that, you install LND or C Lightning or some other Lightning client. Vake wants to know, who are you making fun of? Can you read this? I'm making fun of myself, usually. Embarrassing myself. But thank you for tuning in, Vake. I have been following you on Twitter for quite some time. I don't necessarily agree with all of your views, but that's why we are here. So I'm putting this in the description, just in case somebody watches this and wants to try it later. Raspberry Blitz guide. Okay, so I think I've covered everything that I wanted and even went further and mentioned other topics. I'm gonna play one last game of Mario, and after I die, this is it. The plan for me is to win this, because the best I could get in terms of rankings was a second place, and I hate it when I'm on the second place. So Vake, yes, I can read that if you're still around. This is your chance to start a conversation before I go. And I'm gonna try to win this. Just cautiously, I'm more relaxed than I used to be when I was thinking of advanced Bitcoin stuff to explain. It's quite challenging to speak while you perform an intellectually demanding task. Like playing video games, it's a coordination challenge. You should try it sometime, to try to speak eloquently while playing games. I'm gonna try to do this every week and talk about my work, because this also pushes me to publish more work and do more interviews. And for next week I have an interview with Zach Herbert, which was recorded on Friday, but I did not post it because I wanted to save it for Monday or Tuesday morning. I've already had enough content for 1 week, and it's likely that it's gonna take a longer time until I schedule another interview for season 8 of the podcast. I slipped. So yeah, next week I'm gonna have that one, and I'm thinking about writing an article, one about full nodes, possibly, but something which concerns me a lot more these days is the fact that with companies, like private companies buying into Bitcoin, they are doing the job that governments wanted to do in terms of KYCing the coins. So it's like the private sector voluntarily does the job that governments wanted to get done. They wanted to make every Bitcoin transaction and every Bitcoin address known and declared. And when a company buys Bitcoin with their balance sheet, they're going to have to report which addresses belong to the company. So basically, when the coins leave the custody of the company, they're going to be tainted. They will be known forever as the coins that belonged to the company. For example, MicroStrategy, or what else? Square. Those hedge funds, like, what's the name of that hedge fund manager who bought Bitcoin like a year ago and said it reminds him of gold? I don't recall his name, but I'm pretty sure that he will be among the people who will sell. So when he bought Bitcoins with his company, he's going to sell most likely to another institution. And those Bitcoins are basically going to be held by institutions for the longest time. It's very unlikely that they will get to the hands of regular people ever. Or, I don't know, maybe that they will. Depends on which phase of Bitcoin adoption we're going to be getting next. But still, the fact that more companies buy more coins means that more coins are going to get registered by the companies. So there's going to be less privacy. If more coins are registered, then there's lesser plausible deniability for transactions. So regular transactions that happen outside of the custody of exchanges and companies are a lot easier to spot when doing blockchain analysis. So the amount of privacy that you get with any Bitcoin transaction lowers each time a company... I messed up. Each time a company buys more. So I promised that this would be the last game. Thank you very much for tuning in. This has been fun, and I finished 10th, which is not that bad, but I wish it was first instead. So I got a 1 at least. I wish it was 1.0 instead of 10. Thank you very much for listening to me talk for, how long was it? 1 hour 38 minutes. Wow, I can talk by myself for such a long time. Okay, this is good to know. So thank you very much. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button because it helps more people see this. I'm playing games because I think there is a convergence between video gamers and Bitcoiners, and I'm trying to get the message across to them and converge these two types of audiences. And tune in to bitcointakeover.com. You're going to find a lot more articles. You're going to find a free FAQ which answers most questions which I got. And what else should I say? This is it.